Welcome back to the Running on Grass podcast. I am your co-host, Logan Primino, here with my co-host, Eamon O'Toole. How are things in Wyoming, Eamon?
Logan, it is hot. It is
Yeah, you're
hot,
probably the heat
hot.
dome.
As we discussed when I came out and helped you, I do not do well in the heat. And we had 107 at the Dixon Airport yesterday, and it was 93 degrees on top of Hans Peak an hour ago at noon or noon 30. So yeah, it's hot here, but we have a big shot of rain possibly coming for like the next 10 days starting tomorrow. So we'll see how that works out.
That's awesome. We
How about
are
you?
not part of that heat wave. We've been very pleasantly humid and, 89, 91. Ano Day on Facebook said every day in Southwest Nebraska in July that it's not 100 degrees is a gift. And I thought that was very well said. Because we can just get slant like in July and early August. We can just get like a week of 100 plus, and it's hard on people and it's hard on animals.
Yeah, I've always joked that I quit at 85. The animals aren't working and I'm not working either. Growing up here in the mountains, 85 was a smoking day. We got to 90, that was something. And now we're just seeing 90 pluses all the time. And even in bags, it was 103 a couple, 2-3 days ago.
Grass loses some of its digestibility above 86 degrees. It kind of goes into like a dormancy mode and it's less nutritious. There is like 86 is like kind of a line in the sand for ecosystems.
That's really interesting. I didn't know that, which would explain why our forest grass does so well all summer normally, because it almost never gets 90 up there, but for it to be that hot up there today was pretty shocking.
Yeah. So grass and Eamon O'Toole, 86 max.
Yeah, both of us. Cows too.
Well, what do you want to talk about today? Just let's go over it and then we give our East Coast shout out.
Yeah, we've got another great setup for everybody today. We're going to talk about some sheep stuff, which we rarely hit on, and then Can-Am electric versus gas on the ATVs. Let's see here. We got talk about some acres, cover crops, where that's all heading, and then what we're seeing for current market signals.
Yeah, that right there at the tail end. I got some beef data that's kind of surprising. As you guys know, the market's kind of been tanking here in the futures, but let's give our shout out to Eastco first, and we can get right into it. Who is Eastco, Eamon? Who's behind it?
Two folks, Jen Livesey and J.W. Wood. Jen is part of the Johnson family. They have what's their ranch name?
The Flying Diamond.
The Flying
Kit Carson and other places, but their main headquarters is at Kit Carson.
Yeah. Yep. And they're, real ranchers, do real things. JW grew up on the Parker Ranch in Hawaii. He knows how to handle some cattle. He's done a lot of things. I went on a really cool trip with him to Japan and South Korea with USMEF. So JW is very intelligent, knows a lot of things, and I can't say enough good things about Jen either. So that's who's running the show.
She was the first women King Ranch graduate of their specialty program.
Yeah,
so they're both real sharp.
So everyone's in great hands with Eastco. Those two people know what's going on. They're very intelligent. And I'll let Logan talk about what Eastco is and what they do.
Yeah, so they really are rancher-owned, rancher-focused insurance agency that can really help you. In particular, with PRF, there's some strategy that they can coach you on. Visit eastcogroup.com or email info@eastcogroup.com to reach out to those two.
Yeah. Jen, JW, thank you guys. You guys have been awesome.
Yep. Oh, let's talk about a little bit about farming. Wheat acres are the lowest that they've ever been since records began in 1919, and wheat's just been on a ringer here. You probably don't know that, but it's ripping people's faces off. It's like up like 30 cents today.
I was actually reading an article about corn versus wheat versus soybeans. And I keep thinking, why do the corn guys keep planting more acres? Why do the soybean guys keep planting more acres? And why are the wheat acres down? And I saw that the other day and I couldn't figure out what was going on. And then those guys all made the right choice because the wheat acres are the lowest they've been. And wheat is now being used by you as a cover crop. And you're just grazing it because there wasn't enough to harvest. And turns out that the farmers probably know what they're doing because they put in the least amount of wheat they've ever put in.
Yeah, and it's trying to buy acres right now. Even locally, our basis has really shortened up. You know what happened with the wheat? Wheat used to be priced pretty well, but then wheat in Ukraine and the rest of the world had to produce it fairly cheaply. And there's just a world glut of it now anymore. We used to not, back in the 70s, you used to not make enough wheat. Like, so it was priced accordingly occasionally. And, it was really worth something, but it hasn't been worth much here recently, just globally, because there's just way too much of it. But it's very interesting to watch it, try to buy some acres.
Yeah, and I'll throw this in there just because I've always found it interesting. I went on a Wyoming ag leadership trip to Ukraine in 2012, and things were just starting to get pretty hot when I was there, but it was still touristable. And it was 9 feet deep of the blackest black soil you've ever seen. And they produce a third of the world's wheat, which is
Yeah.
why this Ukraine war is so important, because whoever controls Ukraine decides how the bottom third poorest people in the world, if they live or die, because Ukraine has got a third of it. So if anybody ever gets a chance to go back to Ukraine sometime in the next 30 years, maybe this will be done. It's an incredible place to see, and the soil is just unbelievable. And people don't have yards; they're farming right up to the foundation of the house. It's there; every acre is being farmed over there. It's really neat.
Yeah. That's different than here for sure.
Yeah, but to kind of go back, they get things like that you and I don't, which is called rain. And then they have this really amazing soil that makes anything that you and I have look subpar at best. And they can do such a better job on it with so big, huge fields that, tractors can go over very easily. So I think they have a lot of ability, and that's why they're the best in the world at it.
Yeah. How about both Corey Cable and Justin Dahlgren reached out and said that we should talk a little bit more about cover crop acres and kind of how that fits in. And it just going back to the farm commodity production is just terrible right now. It's well under the cost of production. And both those guys just wanted us to hit again on the economics of grazing, specifically under pivots. And, what I found, it works really good in my dryland setting. I rented a large pivot. I rented 200 acres of irrigated for 2 years from a neighbor to try to grow these cover crops on a pivot. Here's what I learned. I'm a piss poor irrigator. No surprise. Fifth generation dryland wheat farmer, give me a pivot for 2 years. And I just learned that there's a lot to learn.
Yeah.
So I'm the wrong guy to ask for that. Jacob Miller does it, and he does a nice job. But when I run the economics on irrigated, it doesn't quite work. The most that you can really afford to justify is probably $1.50 per head per day on those. Getting 150 animal days an acre is, you're doing pretty good. And I can still do that on dry land. Fits really good into my dryland nation and setting, and I can get enough, but I can't go out. In my system, I can't go out and rent irrigated and pay fair market rent and make it pencil with critters.
Didn't you say in a previous podcast, because of the insurance programs and the opportunities there, that it is easier for these guys to go do that than it is to try and bring in livestock?
Yeah, so you got your program payments and you got your federally subsidized crop insurance. It's every time I do grow a cover crop, I'm turning down federal money. And when you're farming, it's unlike cattle. When you're farming, playing the FSA office and making sure you get your payments is pretty critical, honestly, from the farm side. So the more cover crops you do, the more you get out of it. And Justin's question really was, is it really worth it in the long run? Here's what I want to kind of shout out here is I do think that we can get a carbon program in our farm ground. And I think with the carbon program, when you can do continuous cover cropping and really build, if you did 5 years of continuous cover cropping, I think you can double, triple the carbon that you lay in doing that very rapidly. So I don't think we're there yet, but I do think we'll get there quickly. I think once these carbon companies kind of get all the perennial grasslands that they want, I think they'll start focusing on the farmland and working with farmers. And I think cover cropping combined with that carbon payment will potentially be more lucrative than kind of your federal subsidy that you get.
Really? You think it'll be that good?
I do. I think we can make I think us in particular, even like in Nebraska, I think we can make way more strides on the farm ground versus the perennial pastures.
Mm. That's really great. And I think ultimately, to me, I would rather see somebody using that ground and producing beef on it than just giving up on the crop and saying, all right, I'll just take my payment.
Yeah, no, I think you're right. And it makes perfect sense for like Corey Cable and Justin. Like we're right in that area where it's, the cattle, we're in cattle country, but we've got crops and we're kind of in that perfect zone to really capitalize on it, because I don't think you're going to make a lot of headway in the carbon program without animal integration. And that's also like the cash flow component of the cover crop. So we are in Nebraska uniquely situated to be able to capitalize on that. And that's something I've started looking at. I've got some companies named. I haven't reached out to any of them yet, but I really think that the carbon is going to shift from the perennials to the farm ground. And I think it'll pay handsomely.
Yeah, and that's the piece that I'm the most interested in is you have a lot of old ranchers that say, I'm never taking a government dollar. That's not how we operate. And I will tell you amount of guys that don't take a government dollar anymore that are still in business, I know on maybe one hand.
Yeah. Yeah.
If
That really
you're
changed in the 2012 drought.
Yeah, if you're not going to be involved in the system and like it or don't like it, if you're not going to be involved in the system, there's not very many people that are still in business that aren't.
Yeah. It's built into the price of ground and rental and all that. And so, yeah, you have to be pretty stubborn or, money if you can do that. That's certainly not the case for wine glass. We need to work closely with the government to have them help us as much as they can.
Yeah, the people that I can count on one hand have oil and gas wells, so they're getting a different subsidy.
Yeah, they are. And they probably don't qualify because of that. Now I can't remember what form it is, but if you make too much money, you don't qualify for any or most of those programs.
Yeah. Yeah, that's easy box for me to check every year. So, well, let's talk a little bit about the ATVs, the Can-Ams. That was really cool. I really kind of dug into that. You sent me the email about the Can-Ams and I was clicking all over, and I'm actually in the process of going to trade one tomorrow, and they don't obviously have any electric sitting around because it's pretty new idea. This will be a game changer for you for sure.
Yeah, Ben Gotchel sent it to me. I had not heard of it. He's like, "What do you think of these electric ATVs?" And I'm like, I didn't know that they existed, and they're for sale on Can-Am's website right now, and they're priced at $10,000, which is what a Honda Rancher costs, and it's got a 50-mile-an-hour or 50-mile range, which I was surprised at.
Is this a sit on top or side by side?
Sit on top right now.
Okay. Yep. So just the same as the others. They're offering same price, and you're getting in your operation. I think you said $10,000 a year in gas,
$10,000 a month.
a month in gas.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
we're talking about $120,000 a year to Wine Glass Ranch to the good if you switched over to electric.
Yeah. And when I run my numbers and I look at my overheads, it is only a matter of time before we go all electric. In 10 years, we will not be running much for internal combustion engines. The reason for that is we drive a lot. We've got ranches and cover crops and corn stalks in all corners of one county, and we go into two other counties. And so we just do significantly more driving. And it costs me close to $2. When I look at everything baked in, all the cost repairs, it's $2 a mile, closer to $2 a mile for some of the vehicles. $1.50 to $2 would catch it. And, we'll put this all together. It's like $250,000 to $300,000 expense for me to operate the fleet of pickups that we operate. So I have seen once we do go all electric that we can probably have that easily.
What do you think it's going to cost to charge them?
I think we could put up a solar array at the ranch. I don't think it's going to, I think that, so it'd be $120,000 annually for the gas, that what I'm paying currently. I think we can put up a solar array, and the numbers I've read, even without the solar array, it's like 20 cents on the dollar or 15 cents on the dollar. Even if I don't put up the solar array, I think we'd make a lot of headway there.
I'm just thinking out loud as I'm about to trade these four-wheelers. My main guy that rides the most on his four-wheeler is my flood irrigator. And if I were to get one of these for that guy, I don't think he does 50 miles a day. I bet he does probably 25. And these go 50, right?
Yes.
What about at my elevation?
You're cooler. So if anything, it'd help.
It seems like in everything I've ever had that was with a combustion engine, that everything gets less miles per gallon and all of those things because I'm at 7,000 feet and up. So everything generally doesn't work as well here as lower elevation stuff does.
It makes sense. But here's the nice thing about those electric vehicles. It's like, if you look at the moving parts, it's like batteries that can go bad, and it's like an electric motor and a wheel. It's like,
Yeah.
there's so many things on an internal combustion engine that can go wrong. And then you just look at the electrical motor system, and they're just so simple. I think that's the beauty of it. And, the repair bills, as the 1-2 punch of this eventual move to electric is I expect my repair bills to have as well. So my recharge bill will be 20 cents on the dollar, and repair bills will be at least half, if not 25 cents on the dollar.
Right. And how much do you think the batteries will be to replace them if you have a battery issue or something like
That's
that?
that's the wild card.
That's the
And,
unknown.
they need to make the Cybertruck look cooler. I don't know why they didn't just make it look like a square body.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? They're like going after the futuristic crowd. I think that, one company just needs to make them look like the old GMC square bodies, and then
Yeah.
figure out how to get a Dewey's bail bed on it. We're ranching now.
Let them see you peel out of the driveway with your electric truck and doing it like a Tesla pulls out from a stoplight.
Yeah. So I do. And it's uncool right now, but, we'll get the coolness factor back in. They just need to make them look like the old boys like.
Yeah, like an old Chevy Sierra,
Oh yeah,
one of
you know
those.
exactly what I'm talking about.
Mhm.
When I was up at Schuler Angus, they had two of them in their showroom, and man, they were things of beauty. They just need to make the electric truck just classic baby blue like those two.
You'd get every rancher in the country on top of one of
Oh,
those.
100%. Yeah.
Do you see any other places? You've said you can check fence on a Toyota Corolla. I can't, but do you see any other uses for these or where people are going to use them? Maybe they really kick off when they get to a side by side.
Yeah, the side by side would be great. And I was talking just briefly about it with Ben, and you know this too. I grew up horseback, and the silence that you get with that is just priceless. And these things are like, they don't vibrate and they don't make a noise. And that is going to be a huge appeal for me personally, just because I can remember the horseback days and it just being dead enhances your satisfaction of cattle work by a factor of a few, I'd
Yeah.
say.
And the cattle will be so much calmer because there's not 4 or 5 rumbling four-wheelers around them.
Yeah, yeah, and I think it'll make the help calmer too. I
So you
think.
wanna know what I went to? I've seen this a handful of times in the last 3 years, guys hunting on electric bicycles,
Yeah.
and I have seen one four-wheeler, and I don't remember what brand it was, but this was last year. Saw one electric four-wheeler out, and maybe it was a prototype or something, and I didn't stop the guy. I should have asked him about it, but mostly I've seen the electric bikes, guys out hunting, and they got their backpacks on, and they're got their gun all slodged in there, and they're ready to go, but you don't even know they're there until they're, like, right on top of you.
Yeah, that is nice.
So to me, that's the biggest place, and that's where Can-Am and Polaris and everybody really kill it is with the hunting crowd.
Yeah, yeah, and then, those guys don't care about they're not as price conscious as we ranchers who are looking at waging war on our overhead expenses, as Burke likes to say.
Well, it's cheaper to go shoot an elk or a deer out in the country until you add in the four-wheeler and the rifle and the fifth wheel
Stick a
camper
gear.
and the pickup to pull it and all those things. Otherwise, it's way cheaper than going to buying beef in the store.
Yeah, outside of all those everything else. What are your thoughts on the electric four-wheelers or anything going electric?
I think it's the future. This stuff's just getting, just in the short time that you and I have seen this in our lives, what really over the last 5 to 10 years, this stuff's come leaps and bounds in terms of how long it stays charged, how many miles it can go, all of those things. So I think you're right on. I think ultimately a lot of us end up with electric stuff. The big argument in Wyoming has always been it gets so cold here and that eats through batteries.
Yeah,
And
that's what
so
I'm worried about too.
and, like, if I were to buy one for my irrigator, I would put it in my shop in the winter at my house where it doesn't get as cold, and I would just keep it there all winter. But if I had a fleet of them, I would have to figure out something different because I don't have enough room for 5 or 6 four-wheelers to put in my shop along with all the other stuff I'm trying to keep at a kinda room temperature so we can use it if it gets 40 below. So, that's always been the battle in Wyoming is how cold we get, and then obviously on vehicles, reliability. You get up on I-80 and all of a sudden you have a 40-mile-an-hour headwind or a 50, 70-mile-an-hour headwind, and it's 40 below, and your vehicle said you could go 300 miles, and now you can go 35, and you're stuck on I-80 and it's 50 below, then you're in a jam.
Yeah, yeah, they're. I mean, it's not perfect. There's no doubt about that.
Yeah. So, like I said, I think there's a lot of opportunity with electric, but there's just a few of those things in the wintertime that we're gonna have to figure out as we go along, I'm sure. So, yeah. What do you want to visit about on the sheep side? I sent you
Yeah, let's
that.
go. So Noah reached out to you. Noah, who's my neighbor, if I stand on the far east side of my ranch, we're only about 12 miles apart, but to drive, it takes significantly more than that. But he reached out to you to talk about your experience with sheep, and you have more sheep experience than pretty much any rancher that I know of. Number one.
Yeah, I would not say that I am the number one sheep guy in America. There's still some old timers and guys that are a little older than me, and still guys running a lot of sheep. And I'm glad Noah reached out because there's the thing I sent you as just a short clip, and I think his name's Ben Ledfelt. He's
Yeah, where
the
they talk about 70%
correct.
of the lamb is imported.
Yeah, that would be unheard of in the beef industry. If that happened in the beef industry, people would lose their minds.
But yeah, we would riot.
Yeah. And I've said this before. What I worry about with the beef industry is we lose these numbers. 1900, there were 6 million sheep just in Montana. And today, there are 5 million sheep in the United States.
Yeah.
So my county that I live in was the largest sheep county in the world in like the 1930s
Okay.
or 20s or something. And we had like 300, 400,000 sheep on the tax rolls in Carbon County.
Wow.
And now I think I know of maybe 2,000 that are producers that live in Carbon County and run and operate here. 2,000.
Yeah.
We had 7,000 until about a year and a half ago. And the opportunities was not there. The guys are too expensive, which is the labor are more and more expensive all the time. We used to buy wild horses that you could go buy at the auction for $150 for any wild horse and turn them into a sheep camp horse. You start going there and everybody and their dog wanted to get into the wild horse adoption thing. And now it's $2,000 to go buy a wild horse, which is insane. So just every cost went up from bottom to
Yeah.
top. And the cost of food, I mean, we clothe these guys, we feed them every meal, all the stuff, airplane tickets, everything's gotten more money. We sold our lambs this year for the most we've ever sold them for, probably by 75 cents a pound.
Wow. Well, what was the price?
We got, I think, 335 and we average a 92-pound lamb.
Okay.
And so we had a very bumper year in the lamb deal. First time in my life that you're like, holy smokes, this thing could work if we had, I wish we had 7,000 of them. But on the flip side of that, I'm not trying to water 7,000 sheep every single day. And that'll eat up a lamb check really quick, is trying to water 7,000 ewes that don't have any water in front of them every day. And in this drought, I have a friend that runs an even larger operation than we had. And he told me that he had been hauling water since March
Jeez.
to more than 7,000 sheep every day. And
Wow.
a sheep drinks about 3-ish gallons a day, 3 to 5, depending on heat tolerance and things like that. So
So he's
really,
using a tanker.
he hired a guy, and that's all that guy does is haul water to sheep every single day. Gets up, gets in the semi, hauls water. So, you know, let's say it's not a drought. Sheep business is a great opportunity right now to get in if these markets can hold. And I've talked about this before. The swings in the sheep industry were so bad. You'd get $1.25. The next year you'd get $2. And then next year you get $1.50. And then next year you get 2.25. And then you'd be back down to $1.25. The wool was up and down. You often were holding it for 2 to 3 years, and then you'd sell all your wool in 1 year when you saw a price bump. But not everybody could afford to hold their wool. You just had to sell it every year and take what you got. And a lot of times it's only paying for getting them shorn. You're not even making money off of it. So the sheep industry is really hard. It's very, very vulnerable. And I think there are a lot of guys in this Trump administration seems like they've been paying attention. I have some guys I know more on the periphery that are California sheep guys, and they made a pretty big squall about what's going on and how we're just getting killed, 70% imports, and Americans won't buy, they won't pay the price for it. Well, they won't pay for it because we're getting all this super cheap lamb from Australia and New Zealand pumped into the system. And it's much more complicated than that. But in general, Americans, I think, still like lamb, but we did have a killer in where they fed World War II guys mutton for all of World War II. Those guys were eating canned mutton, just the worst of the worst. And they came back from World War II and said, I'm not eating lamb ever again in my life. And then they told their kids, lamb is awful, don't eat it. We killed 2 generations of the lamb industry in 4 years or 8 years. What was it? 1940-ish to 44, 45. So 4 or 6 years of World War II killed 2 generations of the sheep industry.
Just gutted the US. Yeah, didn't it? And you had told me in the past the most frustrating thing about it is, there's a pretty steady 10-year cow cycle, and you kind of know you have some advanced knowledge as to when it's going to run up and run down. And you mentioned to me that it's just not the same for sheep because of the imports.
Yeah, I just had no idea if it was going to be a buck 25 or 2.25.
Yeah.
And it's pretty hard to manage a cash flow when it's those swings are that much and you have, 7,000 ewes, 10,000-ish lambs. And how do you manage a cash flow when your numbers get that big and your cost can be half or double?
Yeah. And then another thing I've learned from Terrell's up by Hay Springs, they run about 1,000 sheep, and they loved it. Brock told me that it was great. It'd never leave. Well, their shepherd left because of COVID or something like that. I can't remember, but anyway, they sold the sheep because when they were the ones doing the work, they're like, no, we're not doing this.
Yeah.
But as soon as they got their shepherd back, I think they're getting back into it. But if you personally have to do that work, it doesn't seem like it's very sustainable.
There aren't enough hours in the day to run your business and be a shepherd. A shepherd they're as valuable as any employee that's a CEO or anything else. And if you don't have a good shepherd or a good group of guys, it is a hard business. If you have great guys, it is easy, and they make it look easy. They can go out and they've got good dogs. And the joke is if your herder is fat, if his sheep are fat, his horses are fat, and his dogs are fat, then you've got a great herder.
Good one.
Yeah. If everybody's skinny, you've got a bad situation.
So what is your advice, for Noah here, or just anyone that's like in Nebraska in particular, where there's not really sheep or sheep infrastructure? What would your advice be to someone who wants to get to 1,000 plus ewes?
To get to 1,000 plus ewes, obviously it's just like getting in the cattle business. You've got to come up with the capital and make sure everything works. The sheep industry is the same. You need to have, depending on where you're at, you either need the four-wheelers or you need the horses. You need the labor. Finding the right guy. My parents said they had a guy that started with them when they started, and my dad had quoted him over and over. He said, man, if I wouldn't have started with that really good guy, we never would have been successful. He taught me so much. I never could have done it without him. My dad grew up in Miami, Florida, and came out here, married a ranch girl, married into Ladder Ranch, and then got into the sheep business and really grew the sheep side of the business a lot. I bought 1,000 head old ewes and grew it up to be a 7,000 head sheep operation. And he said there wasn't a tooth in the bunch of the first 1,000 they bought, just a bunch of old toothless ewes. And he said, not only were all my preconceived notions were wrong. He said, I knew nothing. So that would be the number one, is make sure you have a good guy. And it's the same if you have good cows too. If you have a good guy, it's a lot easier business. So there's a lot of similarities in them. But one of the things Noah really wanted to know was, how do we market our sheep? And when we had that many, we were selling them on Equity Livestock, which is a Midwestern, it's similar to Superior, but I think they're better. I know that their commissions are a lot better than Superior's, and we could get into Superior and the reason that they've been really bad for the sheep industry as a whole. But Equity's really great, and we sold a lot of lambs through Equity Livestock. We have found a guy that really was one of the guys buying our lambs off of Equity when we sold them, and he was always buying the heavier end of the lambs off of there, and he has his own deal that he's got a way to run them through. And so he's been calling and he's been buying our lambs direct now that we don't have so many. And it's really a pretty, anything you do on a smaller scale, you can really make every lamb great. You can really cull your ewes right. You can do everything better when you have a smaller operation. And when you're as big as we were, you've got your bigs, you've got your mediums, you've got your littles, and then which worked because you then can do more with those three groups rather than having everything has to be right when you're small. And when you're big, you can find different marketing opportunities because you have more animals to work with.
Could he have for 1,000 ewes, could you get a shepherd?
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Especially if lambs are going to stay above $3.
Sure.
Which I can't tell you if they are or aren't because the dang thing moves. But
I remember Cooper Hibbard told when we were up there, he told me they used to run, and we need to get into where sheep fit into your guys' mountain operations, because I didn't know that until I met you. But let me just give a Cooper Hibbard story, and then I'll hit on that or ask you about that. Cooper said some of their last same thing that you've taught me and Terrell's taught me. It's like shepherds are going to make or break you. And the last round of shepherds that they got, they were from like and have never shepherded a day in their life, and they didn't do anything, and that was kind of the end of their sheep program. And they were 3 or 4 generations of sheep operators, like most ranchers in the Intermountain West are, but you can't figure out how to manage that H2A shepherd. It just seems to go to the wayside.
Yeah, the shepherd is the key to the whole thing. And we unfortunately had 2 guys that had been with us since the 90s retire in the last 2-3 years on us. And fortunately, they had some good younger guys coming up below them, and we've been able to keep those guys, and they've done us a great job and had one of the best lambing years we've ever had this year. Although we had, great easy weather, easy winter. Ewes got bred up well. Coyotes and those things seem to maybe have some mange, and so the coyote numbers are down, and the trappers done a good job with those things. So there's a lot of things that came into this year being better, and we didn't have terrible storms that killed a bunch of lambs right during lambing, which can happen. But the shepherd is the key. And where our guys generally come from are like Quechua, or not, sorry, not Quechua. That's the language. They come from, shoot, I'm going to forget
The
the name of the
Andes.
regions, but they're up in the Andes Mountains. Yeah, they're the Incan cultures up in the Andes. And those are the people, they grow up herding just like, my kids grew up on horseback, and their kids are growing up learning that stuff. And it's definitely a challenge with these younger guys because they all have cell phones and they're just like our kids. They want to be on their phone, and we're, figuring out how to work around that. But that's one thing you have to provide them when they come up here as an H2A guy is a cell phone. So even if they live in a place with no service, but the herder is the key, and getting the guys from that part up in the Andes Mountains. And there's a farming region and there's a herding region. And the farming region guys have herded sheep, and some of them figured it out and some of them did it. But the guys that come from the herding areas, those are the guys you want. And I've said this about a lot of guys I've seen get into the sheep business, and you and I have talked about this on the phone before, is if you come into this business, it is worth the airfare for you to fly down to Peru, find your guy, pick him out, and get him to come up and work for you on your operation. That is the cheapest money you will spend, is flying to Peru to go find your guy.
Yeah, and just there's a lot of people who are just not willing to do that because that's what your parents did, if I'm mistaken.
They got some of the first guys were from Mexico. And then as they got into getting guys from Peru, yeah, my parents had been to Peru on their honeymoon. And then they kind of had a pipe. They already knew how to get into this. Yeah, you're right. And then as time went on, every time we needed a guy, we didn't fly to Peru. What we did is we would ask our best guys every year and take turns and say, all right, it's your turn. Who do you want to bring up? And so they would bring up a brother-in-law or a cousin, but they knew if that guy didn't work out, we weren't going to ask him for another guy again. And so they're always bringing up like, one who's going to help keep sending money to the family. And you're not going to get to keep sending money to the family at home very long if you get fired. So they're going to bring up a good guy. And we've had a lot of success in just asking our best guys to bring up good guys and take turns throughout our crew of doing that.
Like it. So the next thing I want to hit on was you just describe to our listeners how you run sheep in the mountains, like where they graze versus the cattle and why.
Okay. So I'm going to take it another level higher than that. We have 150, even now with just 1,200 ewes, 150-mile transhumance, which means we trail from one end of our ranch to the other, and it's 150 miles. And no, we do not own all that land. There are historic sheep trails that you can use to get from spot to spot that, when everybody came out west and they got in the sheep business, these trails were put in, and that's how we still operate on those. Some of those go through cow guys, BLM permits, and some people they give us permission to cross their private land to get to where we're going, but we trail our sheep 150 miles each way, spring and fall. And so that's one piece of it. So they winter in the desert, and the goal is you want to have a good winter with enough snow, but not such a bad winter that you have to feed them. And so if your snow is 6 inches or less, generally, then those sheep can be out grazing. Sheep can eat snow for water. They don't need to have a liquid water every day, which is a huge advantage that a sheep has over a cow. A cow can survive on snow, but not near as a sheep thrives on it. We, in fact, breed them on it. So sheep is an amazing animal. And then we've had our sheep, they lived through some days in 2023 where it got 70 below for 3 days, and our sheep lived through it. We lost very few in that kind of cold. Sheep are a really amazing animal, but then we take them and we lamb them on some middle country that's kind of deserty, but it's certainly not mountains, but it's not like the desert they winter on. And then we'll trail them from there up to our forest permits. And we have some, uh, they're on the west side of like the Platte Valley. They're at the top of Little Snake River Valley drainage at the top of the Colorado River system. And then we have some others that are above Hans Peak, Colorado, north of Steamboat Springs. And so we have country, the high country, the sheep can run up. They don't care how high it gets. Like a cow, you can have brisket problems when you start getting too high, especially in the Angus cattle. And a sheep will run them up to 11,000 feet on our highest part of our operation. And there's a really unique thing as a grass nerd, you'll find this cool. The better the punch. And so when you
That
get
makes
to
perfect sense.
11,000 feet, that grass doesn't have a whole lot of length to it. But man, those are the biggest, fattest lambs in the fall, the ones that go up to those highest permits. And I always found that just fascinating. And so they'll go up there. Well, cows can't go there. So our cows eat more of the lowland stuff. And by lowland in my operation, I mean 9,000 feet, where the sheep will run from 8 to 11,000 feet. And we will also cross those sheep over. So the cows will start low one year and the sheep will start high, and then they'll cross throughout the summer, and the cows will go to the part the sheep started on, and the sheep will go to the cows, the part the cows started on. And the sheep want to eat the forbs and the cows want to eat the grass. It's their first choice. And so they're both eating different stuff. And I have some neighbors that used to be big sheep family, and they now just run cows. And they told me that their country was 10 times better when they had a sheep component to it because it just grew that much more stuff, and the vegetation was way better.
That makes sense. And then when we were on the Matador in Montana, you were telling me that they could easily run a certain number of thousands of sheep and they wouldn't even touch the acres that the cows currently touch. They're not utilizing their uplands, or not uplands, but higher elevation
I would
grass areas.
argue that any ranch could run 30 to 40% of so on a 5-to-1 basis, and it's probably more like 7-to-1 when you take the weight of a sheep and the weight of a cow, but the government gives you a 5-to-1 ratio, 5 sheep equals 1 cow. I would argue that any ranch in America could run 30 to 40% of those AUMs as sheep on top of the cows they already have
Without changing their cow numbers. And
without
that
changing
includes
their cow.
Nebraska.
Yeah,
So I need to get a shepherd. I'll go to Peru.
it's
I'm willing to
arguable.
go
I'll
again.
go with you. I'll help you. I'm
Let's
always
go
up for a
see
trip.
Machu Picchu one more time.
I haven't been yet. I'm the
Oh, we
only
need to
one of
go,
my
man.
I'm the only one of my family that hasn't been to South America.
Missing out,
Yeah.
man.
Everybody's gone but me. Everybody's even gone to Peru but me. Somebody's
You
got to
are
stay home
missing
and
out.
work.
All right, I'm gonna go shepherd shopping, and you're gonna come with me and find me a good one. I
We're
wouldn't know
gonna
a good shepherd if it hit me in the head.
hit you with its staff.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, anyway, if Noah, you have any more questions, sure reach out to us. But I like Logan said, I probably, whether I like it or not, know a lot about the sheep business.
Yeah, I
And
think you pitched us. Like Noah's and me and TJ too, I know was interested in this. Like, I'm ready. $3 lambs. Like you just did like a commercial bit for owning sheep.
hey, I did throw in the part where sometimes they're $1.25 the next year
I
after they're
didn't I didn't
$3.
catch that.
Yeah. So it could be good next year. It could not.
Yeah,
We'll
but you
see.
have no idea. That's what makes it hard. That's the beauty of the cattle industry is that, that tenure, it not always, it shifted on us in our
Yeah.
lifetime, but you
Well,
kind of know when it's going to get good.
I do want to give a little shout out to guys like Cola Still and Carson Jorgensen, who really, they're sheep guys. One's from California, Northern California, Nevada, Cole is, and then Carson's from Utah. And they really were able to, I think, talk to this administration, and they went back to DC and talked to their Congress people and did the work. And I think that those guys really made a big push to help the sheep industry and turn some corners. And the new executive director for I think is doing a great job. So
Nice.
shout out to those guys for really putting in some of that hard work. My dad, Pat O'Toole, spent decades doing it. And, he created new markets and started a Rocky Mountain Lamb Co-op and, tried a lot of things to keep the sheep business going. But boy, if the government's not with you and you're just getting killed with the imports, you just can't out compete that.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Well, what's next, Logan?
Let's get back to beef. Let's talk about beef. The beef markets, the futures markets have really been crumbling on us here in the last 2 weeks. I think it's been one of the things I really wanted to highlight. I've been watching the beef and I've been reading that David Hale's newsletter where he really focuses on the beef. The King's 1973. Love to follow him on X if you don't. Follow him. He is a meat salesman, so he knows meats better than anyone. He said, after 495 consecutive days of beef prices closing above the prior year, that's 495 consecutive days, we've now seen 13 straight days below year-ago levels. An incredible run has ended. The beef is backing up. The sales aren't going and the price is dropping. Not terrible. It's like 375. But it's not looking good on the beef side.
Yeah, and I visited with Burke Tykert on the phone the other day, and he said the producer's really in a tight spot because your insurance program with LRP is sitting back from the highs that we had seen earlier, and the cash market is not in the producer's favor either. And I hadn't really thought of it that way, but he's absolutely right. And I know that I screwed up not jumping on some of those highs during the LRP time and hoping to see that thing rebound, but it just has not rebounded to where I want to do something yet.
Yeah, I keep getting my margin call money back. I'm almost. I didn't check today, but I could be back to even. I'm pretty darn close to it.
You seemed a little smiley, I thought.
That's the worst thing about hedging is the market goes down and you're like, I got a little pep in my step today. It's like it's the exact wrong attitude, but you want to be right more than you want to be wealthy. And we weren't 100% hedged. And so even if you're 99% hedged, a market move higher financially benefits you, but you end up rooting for yourself to be right. And that's one of the hardest parts about hedging for me.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I'm not a hedger. I've never been a hedger. I think everybody that's listened to us over the last, I don't know, several episodes can see that you're clearly the brains of the operation and you understand economics and finance far more than I do. So as a geography, environment, natural resource major, I didn't spend a lot of time in the economics and finance department.
Yeah, I guess. I've told you this before. Are we better off for it as an operation? I don't know. I kind of have the data and it's unclear.
Yeah. As a guy who likes to have spreadsheets, the information is unclear as to what you've come up with.
Yeah. Yeah. But I'll tell you, and here's the big thing. I think that we're going to learn this collectively. We're not in the beef market, you and I.
No.
We are in the cattle market. And there's even segments between us and the beef market. And most of these marketings go to the feed yards, obviously, right? Because they're the number one purveyors of that sort of information. There's not a lot of information directed at the ranchers, and particularly the cow calves. Cattle Facts probably does its best job of trying to cater to those folks. But there is demand for beef, and that is eroding a little bit. And then there is also supply. And there is no news of the supply increasing anytime soon. So from the feeder cattle side, I think it's been overdone. It's just been falling because of the beef, but we're still short cattle in this country. And we have not seen the supplies of cattle coming in yet. And David Peel and Don Close say that it's years away before we see a meaningful increase in the supplies.
Yeah, and I think a lot of it has to do with oil. Well, we've been talking. I want to bring up the markets on the commodities just to give everybody an idea as we do this at 2:30 in the afternoon on the 15th of July. Dollar West Texas crude, 85 Brent, 469 for corn. Natural gas is at 292. I always find gold and silver interesting to look at. It's 4,061 on gold and 57, almost 58 on silver. And wheat's at 677. Soybeans 1201. And, live cattle are 226 and they're down a little bit. And feeder cattle exactly right now, they're up a little bit at 350. So that's where it sits. But it seems like as soon as oil starts moving up, everything else moves down.
Yeah, you're exactly right. It's that war trade where one minute we have a truce and then the next minute we don't. And the markets are trading those like crack.
Yeah, I don't know what to do. And those guys just love oil, sits at the top. Oil's king because nothing works without it, except even the electric vehicles are made out of oil.
Yep, they are.
So I don't know what to do with all of that information, but I know that I am trying to figure out when is the best time to sell calves. It looked like guys that week in the Rockies A lot of those guys hit some homers. A lot of
They
those guys
got
hit some doubles and triples.
Yeah, there was a Western video sale that week as well, and the guys that sold on those are probably feeling pretty giddy right now. Maddox, the same, and the best bar. There's a lot of cattle that sold.
Last week, 2 weeks ago.
Yeah, a lot of cattle that
Yeah.
sold last week, and man, they've got to be just feeling pretty good right now.
So do you think that we see a three handle on anything from here on out, or do you think 26 to 28 is kind of the place
Well, we talked about
for
this
a
on
five
prior.
for a 5 weight steer calf?
Well, I'm not smart enough to know that, but I can tell you the NBA Cowboy on Twitter referenced and not the calves, just the feeder cattle. You know, he's looking at a 160 to 170, 100 weight for feeder cattle as a cycle low, which when that comes, nobody knows, but that's kind of what he was thinking from a technical analysis. And there were some other people that chimed in that are smarter than me that agreed. So I think that's kind of what the low could look like when we got there.
Yeah. Well, other than that, I don't have anything else to throw about the markets. I will give a quick update. My phone keeps popping off. My guys moved a bunch of my heifers today, and I have two different forest permits, and both of them, cowboys on both permits today saw bears, and cattle are not settled. Cattle are trying to figure out what to do with the bears. And one guy on the Colorado side, my cowboy living in a camp up there, saw a wolf today.
What do you do
Yeah.
about that?
Call the Colorado Department of Wildlife and see if they can come up there and figure out what they're going to do about it, because we do not mess with wolves on the Colorado side. That is a good way to get a big lawyer bill, and we do not want to mess with that. The bears in Colorado, they've made it very hard to hunt bears, but they do allow us to take bears if we catch them red-handed in the livestock. So my guys up there are prepared to take care of bears if we catch them attacking calves or cows or anything like that.
Never a dull day at the Ladder Ranch.
Never a dull day. Well, with that, let's put a bow on it. What do we want to talk about next time, Logan?
Well, we're headed to Eamon and I are going to get together here. Actually, probably tonight. We'll grab some dinner if we make it in time for the WRM meeting in Laramie. So we're going to meet up with some other Western ranch managers, and we'll have a roundtable discussion. We're going to do some tours and a lot of high IQ in the room. And I think we are going to cover a lot of that next week. And then you've got Burke coming up to visit your place. Tell us about that.
Yeah, Ladder Ranch is going to do a field day, and we're going to have a bunch of our partners that we've helped get our halter collars paid for, including Ricketts Foundation, Rocky Mountain Elk Foundation, BLM. I did invite the Forest Service just because we're running those cattle on forest, but they did not help us. And Burke Tykert is going to come by. I asked him, we've been talking since this spring to see if Burke had a day that he could swing by. And so he just happens to be coming by that day. And so he's going to stay. And then the next day we're going to run around and go look at some heifers and talk about bigger picture, Ladder Ranch future plans on how we want to run our heifer program. And if that's the right thing to do year in and year out, or if this thing changes in the market, at what point should we make a decision? Should we run steers? Should we run spade heifers? Those kind of questions are where I'm going to be asking Bert this week. So,
Well,
or
I think
next
that's
week.
20 minutes of conversation on next week's episode at least.
We could talk for hours, and I plan on talking to Burke for hours.
Yeah, I'm very jealous. The only reason I'm not going up is because we're AI in a group of H1s, and everyone listening to this is like, isn't the guy who's against AI, and did he say he's just AI in a group of heifers? And yeah, I had to talk the crew into it. Actually, Jeremy did the talking into it, and TJ did a really nice job in selecting some sires, but I maybe hit into that. Why is the anti-AI guy AI and instead of going to see Burke?
I have the same questions. So,
Well, sounds good, Eamon. We'll see
good.
see you here in a few hours.
All right, keep running on grass.
Adios.
Away you go.